The Elusive Millionaire. A criminal scam in New York. Nightfall in Manhattan. The lights of Manhattan sparkled like a promise of endless opportunity. On Wall Street, deals worth billions were made and broken every day, but one man's game outshone them all. Arthur Santini didn't just play the game. He rewrote the rules. It all began in 2004, when Arthur arrived in New York seemingly out of nowhere. No one could quite pin down his origins. He claimed to be the son of Italian immigrants, raised in a modest home in Detroit. Yet his polished manners, impeccable taste in fashion, and fluent command of French and Italian suggested otherwise. His story had just enough authenticity to feel plausible, but not enough to be verified. He wasn't just charming. He was magnetic. Within weeks of his arrival, he was attending exclusive galas and mingling with Manhattan's elite. Arthur Santini, they whispered. Brilliant, self-made, a visionary. Arthur always wore the finest suits, tailored perfectly to his lean frame. He moved through the room like a predator in a silk cage, catching conversations mid-sentence and steering them into his orbit. But his true genius wasn't in his appearance. It was in his words. You see, the market is like an ocean, he told a group of potential investors during a lavish dinner at a rooftop restaurant in the meatpacking district. Chaotic on the surface, yes, but beneath there is structure, and I've spent my life understanding it. Arthur painted a picture of guaranteed success. Exclusive investments in rare art, cryptocurrency, then a nascent and mysterious concept, and properties in hidden global hotspots. His secret? A closed investment fund, open only to those who could afford the $1 million minimum buy-in. He called it Santini Partners. The Elusive Millionaire. A criminal scam in New York. Chapter 2. Building the illusion. Arthur Santini's rise in Manhattan was nothing short of meteoric. By 2006, his name was whispered in the city's most exclusive circles. He was the man who could double or triple your investment seemingly overnight. While others were sweating over volatile markets, Arthur exuded calm confidence, always assuring his clients they were part of something revolutionary. The lifestyle as a lure. Arthur understood that perception was everything. He rented a penthouse overlooking Central Park, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, custom Italian furniture, and a wine collection that would put Michelin-starred restaurants to shame. The centerpiece of his home was a collection of rare paintings, supposedly acquired through connections with European art dealers. His office, located on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in the financial district, was no less impressive. Every detail, from the imported marble desk to the massive gold-trimmed map of the world on the wall, screamed success. Clients often commented on the sheer elegance of the place, as if its beauty alone guaranteed Arthur's legitimacy. He spared no expense on appearances. His suits were handmade by tailors in Naples, his watches limited editions from brands most people had never heard of, and his cars rotated between a Rolls-Royce Phantom and an Aston Martin DB9. Yet Arthur's greatest investment was in his relationships. The network expands. Arthur targeted the powerful and the gullible. He hosted extravagant parties in his penthouse, inviting Wall Street executives, movie stars, and socialites. At these events, he would casually mention his fund, always downplaying its exclusivity to pique interest. "Oh, it's nothing big," he'd say with a dismissive wave, sipping a glass of 25-year-old Macallan. "Just a small group of investors, friends, really. We focus on opportunities that traditional funds can't touch. Rare markets, untapped assets." The scarcity tactic worked like magic. People begged to join, eager to prove they were part of the inner circle. To further his credibility, Arthur partnered with small but reputable firms, hiring them to audit his supposed investments. What these firms didn't know was that they were auditing fake numbers from companies Arthur had invented. The perfect scheme. The genius of Arthur's operation lay in its complexity. He created layers of legitimacy that were difficult to untangle. Art investments. Arthur claimed to invest in priceless art pieces stored in secure facilities across Europe. The artwork didn't exist, but he provided detailed appraisals and fake certificates of authenticity. Cryptocurrency. Few understood cryptocurrency in 2006, and Arthur exploited that ignorance. He told clients that he was buying early stakes in digital gold. In reality, the funds were sitting in offshore accounts under his control. Real estate. Arthur often spoke of luxury developments in South America or Eastern Europe. He even showed investors glossy brochures he had designed himself. The expansion by 2007, Santini Partners had grown to over $150 million in assets under management, or so the investors believed. In reality, the entire operation was an intricate shell game. Arthur shuffled money between accounts, creating the illusion of profitability while siphoning millions for himself. His confidence grew as more and more people handed over their savings. Arthur believed he was untouchable. People want to believe in something bigger than themselves, he told his lawyer during a private meeting. I just give them what they're already looking for. But cracks were beginning to form. Some investors started asking questions Arthur couldn't afford to answer. First signs of trouble in early 2008. A small hedge fund withdrew $10 million from Santini Partners. Arthur scrambled to cover the withdrawal, pulling funds from other accounts. The move worked for the moment, but it set off alarms. One client, a sharp-eyed banker named Jonathan Christ, began digging deeper. He requested detailed reports and scheduled a personal meeting with Arthur. Christ's instincts told him something wasn't right. Arthur, sensing the danger, prepared to handle the situation. As he walked into his next meeting, wearing a confident smile and a perfectly tailored suit, he couldn't shake the feeling that the game might soon come crashing down. The cracks began to show by mid-2008. Arthur Santini's world was an elaborate house of cards, and the winds of scrutiny were starting to blow. He had thrived on confidence, deception, and charm, but his growing success brought increased attention, and not all of it favorable. The meeting with Jonathan Christ was no ordinary investor. A senior banker with decades of experience, he had initially been impressed by Arthur's charisma and vision. But now, Christ was beginning to suspect that the returns Arthur promised were too good to be true. He wasn't alone. Whispers were spreading among the elite. Arthur prepared carefully for their meeting. He knew that Christ's suspicions, if unchecked, could unravel everything. Dressed in his finest charcoal suit, Arthur greeted Christ with a firm handshake and his trademark confidence. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure, Arthur began, gesturing toward the leather chair across from his desk. Let's get straight to it. I sense you have questions. Christ didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need a full breakdown of my investments, every trade, every asset. My team is ready to analyze the data. Arthur smiled, his expression betraying none of the panic bubbling beneath the surface. Of course, he said smoothly. Transparency is key, Jonathan. I'll have my analysts compile everything for you. Expect the report by the end of the week. But Arthur knew there would be no report. There was nothing to report. Stalling for time. Arthur had become a master of stalling. Over the next few weeks, he provided Christ with fragments of fabricated data, incomplete spreadsheets, and vague explanations. Each delay was accompanied by an excuse. Our European partners are updating the appraisals on the art portfolio. The real estate team is finalizing valuations in South America. We're rebalancing the cryptocurrency portfolio after the latest market volatility. Christ grew more impatient, and his skepticism deepened. Behind the scenes, he began sharing his concerns with other investors. Some dismissed his warnings, convinced Arthur's charm and past successes were proof enough. Others began quietly pulling their funds. The media takes notice. Around the same time, a journalist named Grace Harper caught wind of the rumors. Harper, an investigative reporter for a financial magazine, had spent years exposing fraudulent schemes. She began looking into Arthur's background and found almost nothing. No verifiable records of his supposed education, no documented business ventures before his arrival in New York, and no clear source for his initial wealth. Harper contacted Arthur under the guise of writing a profile on him for her magazine. Ever the opportunist, Arthur saw this as a chance to further enhance his reputation. He agreed to an interview, confident he could charm her just like everyone else. During their meeting, Harper asked pointed questions about the specifics of his fund. Arthur deflected with his usual charisma, weaving stories about his proprietary strategies and exclusive global network. Harper smiled politely, but her instincts told her there was more to uncover. Pressure mounts. By late 2008, The global financial crisis was in full swing, and nervous investors were demanding their money back. Arthur struggled to maintain the illusion of stability. Payouts to early investors became harder to manage as new investments dried up. He began liquidating what few legitimate assets he had, but it wasn't enough. The cracks in his operation widened. One evening, Arthur sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from anxious clients. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. "What if this is the end?" he whispered to himself. But Arthur wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He crafted a bold plan. He would host a lavish event to distract his investors and buy himself more time. The Grand Gala, held at a luxury hotel ballroom in Midtown, was Arthur's last-ditch effort to maintain control. The room was filled with New York's elite, who mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres as a live jazz band played softly in the background. Arthur took the stage, his presence commanding as always. He spoke passionately about the resilience of the market and his confidence in the future of Santini Partners. Now, more than ever, is the time to invest in opportunities others are too afraid to see, he declared, his voice dripping with conviction. For a moment, it worked. The crowd erupted in applause, and some investors even approached him afterward to express their renewed faith. But Jonathan Christ wasn't convinced. He stood at the back of the room, watching Arthur like a hawk as the event wound down. Christ approached Harper, who had managed to secure an invitation. "You were right to dig deeper," he told her. "This man isn't who he claims to be." The breaking point: the next morning, Christ filed a formal complaint with the SEC, and Harper published an explosive article questioning the legitimacy of Santini Partners. The article went viral, sparking an avalanche of inquiries from regulators and law enforcement. Arthur knew his time was running out. That night, he made a fateful decision. He packed a single suitcase, withdrew the last of his cash from a hidden safe, and left his penthouse for the final time. As he stepped into a waiting car, he glanced back at the building that had symbolized his success. "It was good while it lasted," he muttered. The chase begins. By the time Arthur Santini's penthouse was found empty, the SEC, FBI, and a swarm of private investigators were in full pursuit. His sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through Manhattan's elite. Overnight, Arthur went from being a celebrated financial genius to the most wanted conman in the country. The fallout: Santini Partners collapsed spectacularly. Investors scrambled to recover their funds, but there was little left. The accounts tied to the firm were drained, the supposed assets non-existent. News outlets dubbed it the Santini scam, comparing it to infamous Ponzi schemes of the past. For Jonathan Christ, the man who had exposed Arthur, the victory was bittersweet. He had been one of the first to uncover the fraud, but he had also lost millions. "This isn't over until he's behind bars," Christ told reporters. Grace Harper, whose investigative article had sparked the firestorm, doubled down on her pursuit. She began piecing together Arthur's movements, interviewing anyone who had ever worked with him. "He's too arrogant to disappear completely," she told her editor. "There's a trail. We just need to find it." Arthur's escape. Arthur, meanwhile, was already hundreds of miles away. Using one of his fake identities, he boarded a private plane from a small airstrip in upstate New York. His destination: Panama. Panama was the perfect hideout: warm, isolated, and known for its lenient banking laws. Arthur checked into a luxury resort under the name Michael Sanders, paying for his stay in cash. For the next few weeks, he lived cautiously. He avoided drawing attention, but his need for luxury betrayed him. He couldn't resist fine dining, expensive clothes, and the occasional yacht rental. What Arthur didn't realize was that his extravagant tastes were leaving breadcrumbs for his pursuers. The investigators close in the FBI, working with Interpol, traced Arthur's movements through his known aliases and offshore accounts. Every transaction, no matter how discreet, brought them closer. One break came when an international wire transfer flagged a dormant account in the Cayman Islands, linked to one of Arthur's shell companies. The funds had been used to rent a yacht in the Caribbean. Grace Harper was also following the money trail. Her sources led her to a dockworker in Belize who recognized Arthur from a photo. "Yeah, I saw him," the man said. He paid cash for a ride to a private island. Looked real nervous. The island encounter on a secluded island off the coast of Belize. Arthur thought he had found a safe haven. The villa was luxurious but remote, surrounded by crystal-clear waters and dense jungle. He spent his days sipping rum, swimming in the ocean, and planning his next move. But the peace didn't last. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Arthur noticed a small boat approaching the island. At first, he thought it was a routine delivery. But as the boat drew closer, he spotted two figures in suits. Definitely not locals. Arthur acted quickly. Grabbing a backpack stuffed with cash and a burner phone, he slipped out the back of the villa and into the jungle. The men, agents working with Interpol, stormed the villa moments later, only to find it empty. "He's here," one of them said, examining a half-empty glass of rum on the balcony. "We just missed him." On the run, Arthur's escape through the jungle was harrowing. The dense foliage and humid air slowed him down, but his survival instincts kicked in. He knew he had to reach the mainland and disappear again. Using the burner phone, he called an old contact, a smuggler who owed him a favor. Hours later, Arthur emerged from the jungle at a prearranged meeting point, where a small motorboat awaited. The smuggler, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, grinned as Arthur climbed aboard. "You're in deep, my friend," he said, starting the engine. "Where to this time?" "South," Arthur replied. "Farther south." The hunt intensifies. The near capture on the island only fueled the investigators' determination. The FBI and Interpol launched a coordinated operation, combing through Arthur's network of contacts. Grace Harper, now working with a documentary crew, obtained exclusive access to the investigation. Her reports kept the public riveted, turning Arthur's flight into a global spectacle. "He's running out of places to hide," she said in one interview. "But the question is, how far will he go to stay free?" The final mistake. Arthur, now in Brazil, had managed to stay ahead of his pursuers. But his luck was running thin. Desperate to secure more funds, he attempted to access one of his frozen cryptocurrency wallets. What he didn't realize was that the wallet had been flagged by blockchain analysts. The moment he logged in, a red alert went straight to the FBI. "This is it," Agent Torres said, watching the alert appear on his screen. "We've got him." The final gambit. The alert from Arthur's cryptocurrency login sent a wave of activity through FBI offices. Within minutes, they had pinpointed his location to a high-end apartment in São Paulo, Brazil. A task force was mobilized, and the chase reached its climax. A temporary refuge. Arthur, oblivious to the trap he'd triggered, reclined in a sleek, modern apartment in one of São Paulo's wealthiest districts. He was still living comfortably, though the constant running had taken its toll. His once impeccable appearance now showed signs of strain. His hair was disheveled, his tailored clothes slightly wrinkled. Staring at the screen of his laptop, he watched as the cryptocurrency balance transferred successfully into a new wallet. The funds, his last safety net, were now accessible again. Arthur smiled faintly. "One last chance," he muttered. But even as he planned his next move, the net around him was tightening. The task force moves in. By dawn, the task force had surrounded the building. Brazilian authorities, working with Interpol and the FBI, coordinated their approach. Agent Torres, who had been tracking Arthur for years, was determined to ensure there would be no escape this time. "Remember, he's slippery," Torres warned the team. "Expect him to have an exit plan." The operation began. Armed officers quietly entered the building, disabling security cameras and blocking off potential escape routes. Residents were evacuated to prevent chaos, leaving the luxury apartment complex eerily silent. The confrontation. Arthur sensed something was wrong when he heard the faint echo of footsteps in the hallway. He quickly glanced at the security monitor he'd installed by the door. Seeing heavily armed men moving toward his apartment, he sprang into action. Grabbing his backpack, laptop, and burner phone, Arthur bolted for the hidden escape route he had prepared, a concealed passage through the building's maintenance corridors. The task force reached his door moments later, battering it down. Inside, they found the apartment empty, but it was clear he had left in a hurry. "He's running," Torres said, scanning the room. "But not far." A desperate run. Arthur sprinted through the narrow corridors, his heart pounding. The hidden passage led him to an underground garage, where a motorcycle was stashed. Starting the engine, he roared out onto the streets of São Paulo, weaving through early morning traffic. But the task force was prepared. Helicopters tracked his movements from above, relaying his location to ground teams. Arthur pushed the bike to its limits, dodging cars and taking sharp turns in an attempt to lose his pursuers as he approached the outskirts of the city. Arthur spotted a train yard, a perfect place to vanish. He ditched the motorcycle and slipped into the maze of tracks and cargo containers. The final stand the task force closed in, combing through the train yard with dogs and drones. Arthur, drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, found himself cornered near a stationary freight car. He had nowhere left to run as the agents surrounded him. Arthur raised his hands, a faint smirk on his face. "Well," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "It was a good run." Agent Torres stepped forward, handcuffing him personally. "You've caused enough damage, Santini," he said. "It's over." Arthur didn't resist. "Over? I think the world will be talking about me for a long time," he replied. The trial and legacy Arthur's arrest made international headlines. The trial that followed was one of the most sensational in recent history. Grace Harper's documentary team covered every moment, from the testimonies of devastated investors to Arthur's own brazen defense. "Everything I did," Arthur declared in court, "was because people wanted to believe in magic. I gave them a dream, and when the dream ended, they blamed me for waking them up." The jury didn't buy his justification. Arthur was sentenced to 65 years in federal prison, ensuring he would never con anyone again. A final twist. Even from behind bars, Arthur's legend lived on. Rumors swirled that he had hidden millions in untraceable cryptocurrency wallets, waiting for someone to access them. Occasionally, strange transactions appeared on the blockchain, fueling speculation that Arthur, or an accomplice, was still pulling strings from prison. Grace Harper's documentary became a global phenomenon, cementing Arthur's place in history as one of the greatest con men of all time. And as Arthur sat in his cell, staring out at the bleak prison yard, he couldn't help but smile. "A ghost," he whispered to himself. "They can't catch a ghost." The story ends with Arthur behind bars, but his legend lives on. If you'd like to refine or expand any sections, or explore potential spin-offs, like Grace Harper's investigation or the hidden funds, let me know. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because that's what inspires me to write interesting stories for you. Share in the comments why you listened to this story to the end, write what you wanted to hear the next story about.